Okay. Hello, everyone, and good evening. This is Dr. B from Steps to the Future, coming to you with this week's College and Conversations with Dr. B. But before we get into that, some of you may have seen the brief video that I put up on my business Facebook page. But if you haven't, let me tell you a little bit about it. So I am getting ready to send out the September newsletter steps. I have to figure out an acronym for that, but I haven't done that yet. But I'm getting ready to send out the September newsletter. And one of the things I want to do is to encourage readership. In looking at my analytics, I noticed, people weren't really clicking on and looking at the newsletter. And I know your inboxes get inundated with so much, but I want to offer you a little incentive to look at the newsletter. So what will be embedded in the newsletter in one of the articles or somewhere around something that you have to click will be a little opportunity to be entered into a drawing for a prize. Now that prize could be a book, because you guys know I love books, or it could be a gift card, or it could be something that one of my colleagues have offered up. So again, if you're already on the list for the it's not for the website, but for the newsletter, please make sure you read it and look for your little hint for your prize. If you're not on the newsletter, you can certainly subscribe to it here at bit.ly/steps140, and that will get you on the newsletter. And while I'm at it, please subscribe to my YouTube channel. I'm really trying to get my numbers up. I finally got my numbers up past 100 where I could now customize my URL. So thank you all for that, but pass it on to other people. So make sure you subscribe to the newsletter. So we're going to be back with you in about 30 seconds, and we'll have this evening's guest, Mark Salisbury, who is the CEO of TuitionFit. And we're just going to talk about paying for college, one of the biggest pain points for parents of college-bound students. So go grab a quick drink, a quick snack, and we'll see you in 30 seconds. Hey, and we are back. I hope you had some time to go and grab that quick drink, because I don't know about you, but when I'm here talking, my mouth tends to get dry. So I always have to have a beverage near me because I don't want to be coughing in your face or, on the screen in front of you. So let's welcome tonight's guest. We have with us Mark Salisbury, who is the CEO and co-founder of TuitionFit. And let me put that URL in here so that you can go on and look at it. So Mark, how about introducing yourself to folks out here?
Yeah, thanks. This is so much fun. This is nice and relaxing. I love it. I'm Mark Salisbury, and I am in lovely Davenport, Iowa, right on the shores of the Mississippi River. I spent 25 years working in colleges and universities, doing a bunch of different stuff, but mostly in athletics and admissions, and then switched over to the academic side of the shop and ended up being sort of eyeball deep in college data. And that sort of set up the one thing that we all know about, which is how do you figure out what price college is going to be for anybody? You can't. And so I started a project called TuitionFit, which was simply, let's figure out a way to allow the public to build it ourselves. And maybe it's the Iowa thing in me, like build it and they will come, right out of Field of Dreams. But the idea was just make it possible for the public to share data together, protect everybody's anonymity so that nobody's personal information gets shared, but see what prices are being offered to different types of students and solve that pain point once and for all. So I've been doing that since 2018-ish, and still going strong.
Well, thank God, because we know that right now like I said, that's probably one of the biggest pain points for parents of students that are college bound. How are we going to pay for this? I mean, that's a conversation I have with all of my families. And there are days when I get a little frustrated when a parent will say, well, we'll make it work. And I'm like, oh, don't do that. Don't do that to yourself.
They don't know what they don't know, and but they're trying so hard to do right by your kids, and
Yes.
you want your kids' life to be better than yours. I've got two young boys, and that's just what you feel way down in your gut when you're a parent.
Mm,
And so you it's natural to feel all that. And I'll never forget this. This is one of the experience I had. It was quite a while ago, but it was already when college prices really were starting to take off and go crazy, and the discount rates were getting to be such that people really couldn't figure out what their price would be. But
mm,
I was given a tour to a mom and dad and their daughter, and the daughter was sort of a couple of steps ahead of us, and talking to somebody else who was given, pointing out some information to him. And dad just pulled me aside and he just said, "Look, my wife and I, neither of us went to college. We worked really hard to try to give our daughter a better opportunity than we had, and we don't have money to just go apply to any school anywhere. Um, can you tell us what our price would be at your school? Because we, even if there's no discounts at all, we might still apply because we really like it. But
mm,
like, just give us something." And I felt really terrible as I was telling them the sort of stock answer that colleges and universities give people, which is, most students don't pay the sticker price. We got lots of scholarship money here. We gave out millions of it last year. And I'm sure your daughter will get a good scholarship and we'll get that price down as best we can.
mm.
And, he nodded and he appreciated my effort, but I could tell that it wasn't the best answer, and it wasn't really all that authentic either. It was the sort of pitch that you give when you're trying to dodge the question.
Mhm.
And for them, the difference of $5,000 a year for them is everything. I mean,
Yes.
$20,000 over 4 years. And from the college's perspective, $5,000 a year doesn't seem like that much. So it's really easy to get lost in this. You're within 5,000. What's the problem? But for a family, that matters a ton. And that experience just has gnawed at me for years afterwards. And it was one of the reasons why when I finally started TuitionFit, I just felt like somebody needs to do this. And if it's not going to be us, the public, nobody's going to do it. So we might as well try. And the result has been, we never have every price out there, but we got enough that an awful lot of families come to TuitionFit, and it's mostly free to see what you need to see.
Right.
And they come away building a college list that's going to fit their price range. And they couldn't have done it any other way.
You
And
know,
that really is gratifying for me.
yeah, you're so right because earlier I was working on um, researching some colleges, and I always like to say, okay, so what merit scholarships do they have? What are the requirements for it? And there were a couple of the colleges. I'm digging around on that website. I'm clicking on all kinds of things. And I said, well, maybe if I just Google it, it'll come up faster. Then I'm doing this. And I spent so much time trying to find the information that I said, okay, let me go walk my dog for a minute because I need to back away from this. And I said, now I consider myself a semi expert. I said, so
Yeah.
if I'm struggling to find this information, can you imagine what families are going through? I'm thinking, oh, I know where to look. I go here, click on this, go to that. Yeah, here it is. I'm like, no, that doesn't make sense. Let me go back here. Well, maybe it was on that other page. And after a while, I just said, okay, my head's spinning. My head is spinning. For those of you that are just joining in with us, we have Mark Salisbury with us, who is the CEO and co founder of TuitionFit, which is a program to help. I like to call it liken it to when Dorothy pulled the curtain back from The Wizard of Oz. It helps you get a little bit more transparency. You get to see what's behind the curtain as far as pricing is concerned. And Mark and his co-founder and team have come up with a great way to do this where it's very collaborative. Um, I'm fortunate to be part of the collaborative. I got to do my part. I haven't done my part yet, so I know that. But again, so for those of you that are listening in, those of you that are watching this on the replay, if you have any comments or questions, please throw them in the chat because we'd love to hear what's on your mind. And if we don't talk to you today and you still want to put a comment in the chat, go right ahead because I do still monitor what comes in afterwards. But I think this is so important for people to understand that there are decent ways to get an idea of what a college costs. Now, nothing is foolproof, but it definitely gives you so much information, and that's what we need, good information.
That's right. It's the metaphor you used of the Wizard of Oz. That's just great because part of what we're trying to do here is give the public some of the power that they're supposed to have back to them as consumers. It's not unreasonable to think that the consumers, we ought to be able to decide what we think our price range is. Right. And to stay within that price range and make the trade-offs that you're going to make based on whatever that is. And to be able to do that. And far too often, families aren't really able to do that. And because of that sort of fog about pricing, it's so much easier to fall in love with something that really isn't going to be in your price range. But once you sort of fall into that emotional trap, you then pick one school, and as a function of picking a school, you eliminate 100 others.
Right.
And then 6 months later, now you find out the dollar amount. What happens so often to families is when I say this phrase, I stumbled on this phrase, I didn't make this up, but they're over a barrel and under the gun.
Yeah.
And they make financial decisions that they never would have made in a different setting. Well, they borrow in a way that they would never have borrowed before. They're not crazy. They're smart people, but they feel this pressure as a function of the system that makes them feel powerless and makes them feel stuck. And then they end up in debt that they didn't want to be in. And it shapes what options are available for the family and for that student going forward. So it just seemed like we needed to reallocate the power and balance it out a little bit between the colleges who are trying to get you to buy something and the public consumers who need to buy that thing, but don't have the money to just write a check for whatever the school asks for. And to make it possible for people to enter this process with some clarity. And that doesn't mean that you have to have the magic 8-ball approach, right? Where I have to be able to predict for you down to the penny what your price is going to be at school X. Nobody's asking for that. They just want to know that, yeah, if my price range is $20,000 a year or less, let's just pick a number arbitrarily, that I'm looking at schools that are going to be in that ballpark or thereabouts. And I'm not looking at schools that are going to turn around and say, yeah, we'd love to have you, and your price is $45,000 a year. That's not how this is supposed to work.
I know. It's so, I don't know. I get so frustrated because, I've been reading, I'm always reading something, but I've been reading this book called The Sum of Us. And part of what Heather McGhee does in her book is she's talking about, part of it was about how colleges, there was one section about how, the price of colleges and how things started going up and talking about Pell Grants. Because I remember back in the day, I got a Pell Grant, because we were very low income. I'm sure my mom's EFC was zero, single mom with, 4 kids at that point when I went to college. So I know our EFC had to be zero. And I qualified for a full Pell Grant. And I went to Rhode Island College, which was one of our state colleges, because I wanted to be a teacher. And if you lived in Rhode Island, that was the college you went to. And
Mhm.
I was also fortunate enough to get into this program called the PEP program, Preparatory Enrollment Program. So there was merit money, scholarship money, grant money from that. But that Pell Grant covered so much.
Mhm.
It covered so much. And today, that the Pell Grant, what did I just read? In some state schools, maybe a third of the tuition if you're lucky.
Mhm.
And I'm like, oh my God, and I kept saying, why is this getting, when I became a school counselor and then started seeing these prices going up, and now going back and reading different books, Ron Lieber's book and other books, I'm like, wow, this is so wrong. This is just so wrong.
It's
You
what
know,
happens when the entities trying to sell something
yeah,
get way more power as a function of having way more information
right,
than the people that need to buy that something.
right.
And this happens, folks that are way smarter than me, economists, do research on this stuff all the
Mhm.
time. And they came up with a term called information asymmetry, which is just a complicated way of saying, yeah, those guys know stuff I don't.
Mm,
And um, as a function of that phenomenon, whenever you have information asymmetry in a marketplace, people are always paying more
mhm,
than they would have to otherwise. And the range of prices that people end up paying becomes really wide and spread out. And just people have anecdotal examples of getting a good deal. But for every one of those examples, there's 1,000 stories of somebody
mhm.
getting hosed, getting stuck, paying way more than they should. I do remember when I was working in colleges and universities of a story of a couple of freshmen who discovered malted beverage and then found out that they were one was paying $5,000 a year more than the other, and
Ooh.
came to blows over that. I'm sure the malted beverage had something to do with it, but they didn't have any idea until all of a sudden they stumble on this information in about midway through winter of the freshman year.
Yeah,
And that's kind of goofy, right? Like,
it is.
but that's the nature of the way that this marketplace works now. And so the collateral damage is substantial, especially when we look at the number of students that are now no longer in higher ed, just from a couple of years ago to now.
Mhm.
It just folks see this price malaise and they say, well, you know what? My situation might not be great, but at least I've got some certainty. I'm not going to go down that road when there's tremendous uncertainty of maybe it works out great, but maybe I'm worse off. So I'd rather
Right.
stay where I am now. This is not this is not how you create economic mobility, right? This is not how you
No.
get to equity, right? This is how you freeze things in the way they always were. And nobody wanted that. Higher education institutions don't even want that.
Yeah,
But
but that's where we are, though.
that's where we are. So sometimes in situations, I'm sure we've all been in this, we see a scenario where, yeah, that's a mess. Somebody has to fix it. None of the people in the middle of the mess are going to fix it. Maybe I can just step in and try to do something. All right. Well, we'll see how it goes. Hopefully, I don't get smacked in the nose, but it's
So,
the right thing to do.
so how did you and your co-founder, how did you come up with this particular design?
So, a couple of things. One is we said right out of the gate, if we're going to do anything, it's got to be a free thing. It's got to be sort of a free exchange of info. Like if you share something, you ought to be able to get to see something, and it
Okay.
should be a free exchange. The second thing we said was we got to do this in a way that isn't contributing to the problem. And the problem being the sort of really crazy high stress college admissions process. And one of the things that contributes to that problem is this billion-dollar industry of organizations like the College Board and ACT and others buying, or not buying, getting students' names and contact information and then selling them to every college. And the result is that students get bombarded with brochures. And they just say, like, uncle, I'm out. Like, stop sending me all this junk. Now every college looks the same, and it seems like I'm getting sold something that I don't really know. And so for the students, the whole thing becomes really transactional, and we lose the opportunity for the college admissions process to be this wonderful growing experience that it should be for young people. So we started with sort of two premises: that we didn't want to contribute to that problem, and it had to be a free thing. And started to kick around ideas, but honestly, we're just copying something that was done in the car industry about 20 years ago.
Okay.
It's not even real. So like, anybody who thought, like, I'm like just totally flattered when anybody tells me this is a great idea, you guys are really smart, because I'll take it. Like, there's a lot of times where people in my life haven't thought I was not so smart, so I'll take it when anybody says I was really smart. But in the early 2000s, middle 2000s, the car industry was exactly the same thing. Nobody knew what the price was actually going to be. There were sticker prices. Nobody paid them. The discounts weren't as big as they are now in higher ed, but the sticker prices weren't quite there either. But the point is everybody just dreaded, if you had to go shop for a car, you just dreaded to go into the sales manager's office and have to haggle and get a price and never know if you got a good price or if you got a bad price. Meanwhile, the car industry all knew that the sales managers all knew, because they'd studied this. If they could get you to stay in the office for 45 minutes or more, all of a sudden the likelihood of you buying the car jumped. Because that was the sort of threshold where you're like, okay, I give. Like, just, I'll pay whatever. Just get me out of here. This coffee's terrible and the hot dogs are cold, right? Like, so the car industry was a mess, and it had been that way for a long time. And a company named Edmunds came along, that I think they're still around. And Edmunds basically said, you know what, let's just have people go park outside the car dealerships, and when everybody drives a new car off the lot, we'll just follow them to the restaurant or the bar they're going to celebrate, buy them an appetizer, buy them a drink, whatever, and then ask them what they paid for it. And then we'll just report that and publish it. So they started doing it. And at first, of course, the car industry was furious.
Of course.
But a couple of years later, car industry says, you know what, why don't we just join them? Can't beat them. And a couple of years later, there's now actually academic data research on this. More people bought more cars and they paid less for them because of that transparency of information that came out. So I saw that story and I thought about it, and I thought, you know what? We kind of need more people to go to college and pay less for it too.
Right.
Well, maybe this is a way to get there. So combine that reading in the doctor's office before an appointment in a magazine I would never picked up anyway, with, we got to do this in such a way that people's information is protected. We're not selling their information. People's anonymity is protected. If they share something, it's a trust exercise. So we got to earn that trust. Let's do all that and see if we can pull this off. And that's all of what shaped building TuitionFit.
Okay. All right. So for those of you that are just joining in, you see that URL on the screen, tuitionfit.org. Go to it. Look at it. Tell us what you think. Mark and I love talking and having conversations, but we'd love for you to join in it. So, go and check it out. See what questions you have. I know I remember when I first heard about it, in my head, I'm thinking, oh my God, another thing I have to learn. Because we have so many things coming out, and you're like, this is going to be good. But then I started seeing more people talking about it. I started seeing it around. I went on the website and I'm like, okay. And then we met at the conference, but the conference was so, I don't know, it was the first in-person conference in like 3 years. And I was like, ugh, I don't know, I got to get out of this vendor sponsor area because it's like crowded.
Yeah,
and,
you and me
and I'll,
both. All those social muscles
yeah,
have atrophied, and I just wanted to go back to bed.
yeah, I've got to learn. I got to see. It allowed me to really dig into my being an introvert. So now I've got to learn to get back out of it again.
Yeah.
Um, and then both, and we had conversations one on one, and I'm like, oh, okay, all right. This makes sense. This makes sense. For me, where I'm finding my challenge is getting people to because I don't always get from my families a copy of the financial aid award letter. So getting folks to like backtrack and do that, oh, I don't think I have it anymore. Well, it's here somewhere. I'm like, okay, send it to me as soon as you do. But one of the things that has made me know that I have to be intentional about now is like really pushing that, really pushing that and helping people understand. Then I'll have some families who will say, well, for them, cost may not be an issue, so they're not buying into it as much. But for other families, I mean, I think it's such a great way for people to be able to have that transparency, and it's important to know what you're going to be paying over the years so that um, it fits your family budget. Especially when tuition, may go up 3 to 5% per year at some schools. Some schools have frozen their tuition, but others, it's gonna go up. So you need to know what you're going to be paying. And if you have more than one child in college, you definitely need to have an idea of what you're going to be paying. And if the Department of Ed has their way, they're going to make some changes to the FAFSA, which will disadvantage families with multiple children in college at the same time. Hopefully, by the time that comes around to when it's supposed to happen, they'll have changed their minds. That would be really nice. You hear me out there, Department of Ed? Drop it. We don't need that. Families are already paying enough, so let them have what little breaks they have.
One of the things that is, I I have a lot of conversations with folks that work in high schools in different ways,
Mhm.
either teachers or school counselors. And I don't know what it's like in your neck of the woods in North Carolina, but in a lot of places in this country, the schools are scrambling to hire teachers. They're scrambling to fill
Mhm.
counseling positions that they can't fill. And certainly some of that has to do with people just burning out from the pandemic and other things. But one of the things that I've seen with using the TuitionFit data and I've seen over the past decade is students come into college or thinking about going to college and they really want to be a teacher. They really want to be a
Mm.
counselor. They want to be a social worker. They want to do good for society. There's a lot of students that really think that's what they want to do coming out of high school, going into college. And then they hear more and more, you don't get paid very well in that position. So, that's not a good major to go into because you don't get paid
Mhm.
very much. Or, the ROI, the return on investment is just not good because college is so expensive. And so they decide not to be a teacher, or decide not to be a counselor or a social worker. And there's actually some research on this that just came out that looked at a university that was a more selective place, but it was a school where they made a decision to shift from having loans be a part of the financial aid package to having
Mm.
it all grants, right?
Grants.
Remember Amherst did that last year, but Princeton
Mhm.
did it a while back. There's a number of schools that have done that. And so the researchers looked at how that impacted students' decisions while they were in college, sort of a before and after. And one of the conclusions they came to was that after that policy shift, more students pursued careers in teaching, social work,
Mhm.
public good professions that might not pay as much.
Right.
But because those students didn't have those loans to deal with anymore, they were free to pursue the thing that they wanted to do, despite the fact that it might not pay that well. Now, translate that to what we're trying to do at TuitionFit. What we see a lot in the public sphere and gets published is this discussions of return on investment, and we see that professions like teaching and social work not getting a whole lot of love
Yeah.
in those analyses. But what gets left out is that for each individual student who wants to be a teacher, yes, there's absolutely a school where if they go to that school, when they graduate from that school, they won't be able to afford to be a teacher. But there are absolutely other institutions where that student
Right.
pursue that same degree, get a great job with that same degree from that different school, and it's absolutely a positive ROI. The question is, how do you find
That's
those
cool.
institutions?
Mm-hmm.
And really, the way to start is you have to be able to shop by price at the beginning. You have to be
Yes.
able to say, here's my price range, because I know I want to be a teacher. And
Mm-hmm.
so I know kind of what I'm going to get as a salary when I finish. So my price range has to be X so that I can afford to do the thing that I love and really be able to give back what I'm capable of giving back. So now let's make sure I'm looking at the schools that fit that price range. And then I can dive deeper and think about size and distance from home and social and all the other things that matter. But that's something people haven't been able to do until using this data set.
Yeah. I love what you said about, starting with price at the beginning, because there are times, families come to me sometimes in their senior year, or they say, well, we already know we're applying to these schools and what have you. And I'm like, oh, okay. Let's look at some of the finances behind that. And they've already come with a list of schools without thinking about the cost of the school.
Right.
And then when you send information, some families will take the information and use it, but others, oh, but this is the dream. I said, yeah, but that dream can turn to a nightmare upon
Mm-hmm.
graduation. And then, 6 months out, those loans are going to start coming due. And
And I don't think
it's
they know
crazy.
that they can use price as a lens. And so since
Yes.
they don't think they can, they kind of default to, well, I guess we'll just go down the road that we're on. And in that sort of empty, uncertain space, there's all kinds of room then for the other emotions to sort of take over, including,
Mm,
well, we got to do right by our child, and he or she really wants to be somewhere like this or that, and wouldn't that be wonderful? And we all know we're human beings. We're not rational
mm,
beings. We're
right.
rationalizing beings, right? And the more uncertainty that exists, the more likely we are to sort of fill it in with rationalizing.
Mm,
And you get that exact situation where the family walks in with a list, and as the counselor, they expect you to make it work.
mm,
And you know something they don't know, but it's really hard to rewind the tape at that point.
yes.
And it would be so helpful for them if they could just simply start with price,
Mhm.
know that where you go has no effect on who you become, and
Definitely.
play the long game.
Yeah. I love when you were talking about being a teacher now, having been a teacher for God knows how many years. I have this story. I tell people this funny story. So it's, like I said, I went to Rhode Island College, which was one of our state colleges, and it was the one that was known for, if you want to be a teacher, that's where you went. And I remember I was teaching at in East Providence, and I was at one of the two middle schools, and we worked on teams of four. So it would be an English teacher, math teacher, science teacher, social studies teacher. So I was the social studies teacher. And I remember my colleague, who was the English teacher, went to an Ivy League and would frequently remind us that she graduated from an Ivy League, to the point where I never forget one day at a table, we were sitting at the table at lunch, and it's probably the 50 millionth time she mentioned that she went to an Ivy League. And I remember saying to her, and I'll just say Sue, said, Sue, so when you get your paycheck every 2 weeks, is there more in yours than mine because you went to an Ivy League? And she just kind of looked at me and I said, because you need to stop talking because you're not getting any more money in your paycheck. So let's cut that out right now. Because it got to the point where I'm like, okay, I'm tired of hearing this.
Yep.
Um, but again, I was talking to a student recently who is considering education, and because of a lot of things about how teachers are treated, they're not paid, so many things. I asked her, I said, I really need you to think about this. I want you to talk to people that you may know that are currently teaching, that are in the profession. Um, and that means you have to look closely at how much it's going to cost you.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it doesn't make sense to go somewhere that's going to cost you $60,000 a year when you can go somewhere else for maybe $30,000 or less, or even over the whole scheme of things.
Mm-hmm.
Because, like what you said, that teaching degree, when you get your teaching certificate from a school district, it does not say we hired you because of this reason. It's because you are a certified teacher.
Right.
They're not asking you, the kids aren't asking you what college did you go to. The parents aren't asking you that question. They just want to know, can you go in that classroom and do what you're supposed to do for my child?
Right.
That's what they're concerned about. Um, so here in North Carolina, we have 4 schools that are part of what they call NC Promise.
Mm-hmm.
So with NC Promise, and it's a tuition program. So with NC Promise, if you're in state, tuition is $500 a semester. If it's out of state,
Full time.
full time,
Full
yes,
time.
full time, $500 per semester if you're going full time. Doesn't matter what you're majoring in. And if you're out of state, it's $2,500 a semester. So that's UNC Pembroke, Western Carolina, Elizabeth City State University, and Fayetteville State University. So 2 HBCUs. Pembroke is a land grant college that was actually started to help Native Americans,
Mm-hmm.
and then Western Carolina is up in the mountains, going kind of towards Asheville.
Mm-hmm. Right.
So when I mention that to people, and they go, "Yeah, but I still want to go to," I'm like, "Okay, let's look at how little debt, if any, you're going to come out with these schools. They're in part of the UNC system, all
Yeah.
4 of them. Like, come on, guys, especially when I know a family, income is challenging for them. There's nothing wrong with any of these schools. I've been on all of the campuses. I've talked to students at each of these colleges. You're going to get a good education
Mm-hmm.
for a lot less money. And Fayetteville State even has a program where that they've started about helping you through in the summer. If you have to take summer courses, they will pay for the summer courses
Really interesting.
because they want you out in 4. They're
Yeah.
they're really working on getting you out in 4 years so that you're not paying more money, so that you can get started in your career. And, sometimes I'll say, hey, you should think about this. And they just kind of look at me, well, I really kind of want to go to, and then, let's look at the money here. So again, for when I'm working with families, it comes down to the final decision is theirs. So I consider my job to be like an information broker, to make sure I'm giving them the best information possible so they can make an informed decision. May
And
not be the decision I make, but
I think you're also able to give them the long view.
yeah.
When you and I have joked about this before. Kids and doing the thing you do as a family, and you know, uh, you're immediacy is sort of like, what am I doing for dinner tonight? Like that's a,
Mm,
what are you doing for the weekend? I don't know. Like I'll get to dinner first. Like, like you're thinking about just what's coming up, what's coming up, what's coming up. And that's a lot of times that's all you got the bandwidth for.
yeah,
And you take that a little bit beyond, and as a parent, you okay, college is coming up. Okay, well, we just got to get him into college. Well, and get him to a college, and it needs to be a good college, and then it'll work out after that, right? And you're
right.
just thinking about that because it's kind of, in some ways, I think there might be something that just comes out of being in that mode your whole growing up, right? Helping people just
Yeah,
get there. But I parents oftentimes, the sort of picking the college and getting them to college, in their mind, that's the proxy for going to college, succeeding in college, and then graduating into adulthood. But the
right.
sort of way you can focus it on a thing you sort of think you can control is, well, which college? And it needs somebody like you, somebody who can zoom out a little bit to say, like, nope, here's the long game. Going to college, in a lot of ways, it's just like going from middle school to high school. You just went to the next one, but which high school you went to didn't change everything. It's sort of who you are
Mm,
when you graduate from high school. That's the thing.
right.
And no matter where you go, you're going to have a great teacher. You're going to have a horrible teacher. You're going to have
Hmm.
somebody you click with, somebody that you just cannot click with, no matter what you do, right? You're going to have
Right,
somebody who sends you over the moon and somebody breaks your heart. You're going to have good days and bad. Like that's just the nature of how it's going to go.
right.
But you navigate it and you play the long game. And our goal for our students is not even just to graduate, it's to graduate into a life in which you
Yes.
have the financial flexibility to pursue who you've become. And so if that's a teacher, you're in a position to pursue being a teacher. If that's a social worker, be a social worker. If that's a computer scientist, great, be a computer scientist.
Right. That is
But
so true. So I just wanted to share with people, make sure you have the URL, but here's the website. So I really want people to go on this, go on there, read the section about how it works, read the blog post, find out about this tool. This is a tool that may help you save money. I won't say may help you, it will help you save money if you use it properly. And for those of you that are interested in actually reaching out to Mark and asking him more questions, this is his email. You can
yeah,
certainly send him an email and ask him questions. And my favorite mode is to go on LinkedIn. So you could go on LinkedIn. You can follow Mark on LinkedIn. You can see the types of articles that he's posting, the information that comes through on this particular platform. But I really want people to use this. I want you to say, okay, I know my child is going to go to college. I know we don't want to be in debt. And this is something that I can actively do to make sure that we're not in debt. And as Mark said, it's not going to give it to you down to the penny. But God knows we've got to start budgeting better. I mean, there are a lot of other things that need to happen on the other side too, but what action can you take? What action can you take to work with what we have right now? The college system is broken as far as how much it costs and all this other craziness. So there are a lot of things that need to be fixed. But right now in your home, what is it that you can do to help make a difference for your family? So I really think if you just start looking at tuition fit, and if it doesn't work for you, it doesn't work for you.
yeah.
But you don't know unless you try. You don't know unless you look. And guys, I don't get any kickback on this or anything. It just hurts my heart when I have families that get dead set on a college and people say, oh, well, we're getting scholarships because there's rumor out there that, yeah, you apply to a college and you're going to get scholarships. There's all these scholarships that people aren't applying for, and there's all this unused money. Really? I don't,
It's a
that's
great
bull.
example of colleges. They
Yeah.
will report the amount of total scholarship money that they award every year.
Mm.
and it's always in the, millions.
Yes.
Great. Awesome. Wonderful. But what about for each individual family, right?
Yes.
This is where that big number doesn't really do you a lot of good. It's, this is part of what's happened as a function of the sticker price stuff. And if people want to know all of the stuff with college pricing, they can always go and Google my TED talk from a couple of years ago. I sort of spell all this stuff out. But essentially, the colleges decided they were just going to set sticker prices at the sort of crazy high levels that they didn't expect anybody to actually pay, but they were going to use it as the sort of way to get people to think that they were really, really high quality because they must have been really expensive. And then later on, we'll give you a bunch of scholarship money whatever we got to give you to get you to decide to come. Well, over time, that creates this wonderful number of the amount of scholarship money that they give out in total. But it also makes it possible for the school to have this really high number, promise a lot of scholarship money, and then just say, well, here's $5,000. See, we gave you a scholarship. And you're saying, okay, great, that got me to 65,000 or price tag, but I need it to be 25,000.
Mm-hmm.
And you've already eliminated all kinds of schools. You've already sort of fallen in love with the place, and it sets up the malaise that we're in right now. So the system isn't designed, and at that point too, right? Like just when you're
Mm-hmm.
starting, nobody cares. Like nobody cares if it's a penny off or $1 off or $100 off. What they care
Right.
about is just put stuff in my ballpark and
Yes.
let me know all the schools that are in my ballpark. And then I could be an informed shopper and figure out which ones of those are actually worth looking at and why. But make it possible for me to be an
Mm-hmm.
informed shopper that doesn't have to worry about what's the stuff that I don't know that I wish I did know, but I won't find out until after it's too late to know it.
Yes.
Ugh.
I know. So we have a comment from Jess. Hey, Jess, thank you so much for joining in. So Jess is a colleague, and she says every student would benefit from using TuitionFit. Cost transparency is so incredibly important in the college search. I hope every parent and high school student listens to this conversation. So thank you, Jess, for that, and I know Mark appreciates it.
I
I mean,
do. Thanks, Jess.
it's just so. I keep using the word frustrating, but it's frustrating, it's heartbreaking because, like you said, every parent wants to do right by their child and they want the
Yeah.
best for their child. And somehow they've equated maybe a name of a school or the price of a school with being the best for their child, but it's the best for your family. It's the best for your family. When you hear about folks, in their 50s, 60s, still paying off college debt. And now their kids have college debt. And now it becomes generational college debt. And I love the whole idea of going to college. I think college is so transformative. I think if it's right for you, then you should go. But I really want people to be able to do it in a way, like you said, that not only do they get in, but they thrive and they graduate and then they can go on and they can buy a house, they can start a family, they can travel, they can do whatever else they want to do because they'll be able to afford it. Right now, when you read these stories that come out all the time and people are like, I know as a teacher, I had to make the decision, do I work in the summer to supplement my pay?
Mhm.
Um, and I did that and I did that until I had my kids, because then it made more sense for me to stay home and not pay daycare.
Yeah, right.
So I said, okay, this doesn't make sense. The money I'm making at this summer job is just going to pay daycare. So I just stayed home with them during the summers until they were old enough to be on their own and do whatever they needed to do. But it's just that whole that whole conversation, that
Yeah.
whole conversation. And I talk to parents who, well, I started saving and realized that the savings isn't enough, but at least, I mean, it helps some, but you still you have to price shop.
Hmm.
You have to price shop. And again, I agree with you so much about, let's start with the cost first. at least determine what is it we can afford instead of just saying we'll make it work. Oof.
There's so many families that said we'll make it work and
Mm,
then didn't make it work.
yeah.
The number one reason why students drop out or transfer um, is because of financial issues. I mean, the
Yeah.
numbers are just stunning and they're just very clear over and over. And none of those students thought that they were going to have financial issues when they started,
Hmm.
but still went anyway.
Yes.
They got part of the way in, and there's a combination of that voice in the back of your head that says, I don't know if I can really make this work. And
Hmm.
then when things don't go as well as you'd like, that gives that voice a megaphone. And that megaphone all of a sudden said, see, I told you it's not going to work. And then
Right.
you start to withdraw and you're a less engaged student. And that vortex sucks you right in. And end of the first year, you're like, I'm out. There's no way this is worth doing. But in the meantime, you've already accumulated a bunch of debt.
Yes. Oh my God.
And now
Yes.
you don't have a degree, but you still got to pay off the debt.
Yes, you do. Yes, you do. And probably one of the worst things, because people aren't telling them this,
No.
is that now you may think, okay, so I'll just go to the community college. It costs less. But you can't, most of the colleges will not release your transcript for the schools, for the classes you did complete, so that you can go to the community college until you've paid off that debt to them. So it is such a catch 22. I was just reading recently where they're looking at hoping to do away with that. I know some colleges have done that, but quite a few colleges, if you still owe them money, they're not releasing a transcript to you. And if you're going to another school because it costs less, or you decide, I'll do a community college because then I can live home, so that saves some money there, and plus it costs less for the credits at a community college. But then when they ask, okay, do you have any college credits? And you say yes. And they say, well, we need to see your transcript. Well, I can't get the transcript. Well, we can't give you any credit for these classes until we see the transcript. So now you've taken classes, you've got credit for it, but you can't prove it. And you're still paying off that loan in the meantime. So it's crazy. And so there are days when I'm talking with my friends that are in the business, or I'm talking with my school counselor friends, and some days we just sit there and we're like, okay, if we're struggling with this, to learn all these ins and outs, and let's what's behind door number one, what's behind door number two, what's behind door number three. Families shouldn't have to do that. Families shouldn't have to do that. I know back in the day when I went to college, was a long time ago. It was just, okay, here, just apply to this school. Okay, yep, you want to be a teacher? Yep, go to this school. I had three choices, but I knew I was only going to go to one because that was the one where everybody went in Rhode Island if you want to become a teacher. So that was fine with me. Because I didn't mind that I didn't have to leave too far from home, because I still got to live on campus, so I didn't have to be up under my mother all the time. So that was good. But again, it's just having those conversations. It was such a different time. And when our youngest son went to college, um, we lucked out. We were able to. We told him, "You do what you need to do. We'll make sure we pay tuition." And I remember when he decided to transfer, I said, "You can only transfer if it's still within this budget."
Mm-hmm.
And he did transfer to another school out of state, but because of how close we were, if you're in New England, nothing's really far away. Um, we were able to still keep it reasonable. But even with that, we did a monthly tuition payments, because that's what we could afford. That's what made it work for our budget,
Mm-hmm.
to do it that way. I mean, it wasn't just like, okay, here it is out of our pocket, do it. No, we did a monthly tuition plan um, with this company, and it worked for us. I don't know if we could do that today. I don't think we would be able to do that today. Not at today's prices.
If you take the old school way of doing college search, which is pick your school and then figure out how to pay for it,
Hmm.
you're almost certainly going to today. You're almost
Yes.
certainly going to get into a position that you didn't want to be in. Doesn't mean you
Hmm.
can't make it work, but it's not the way that you would design it if you were to design it from the beginning with the finances in mind as a family. And there's
That's
no reason why families shouldn't be able to do that.
That is so true. That is so true. So earlier, folks, Mark mentioned that he has a TED Talk. So the URL for the TED Talk is here. So you definitely go on, listen to it. And as I said, it's really important because people are out here listening to this or are going to watch it on the replay, and you're going to have questions, especially once you go on the website and start poking around. You're definitely going to have questions. So I really, again, strongly encourage you to reach out to Mark with your questions. Um, talk to him about TuitionFit. But first, like I said, go on the website, play around with it, see what it's all about. Um, you will have questions, and then reach out because it really is something that the longer I do this work, which has been a long time already, but the longer I do this work and the more I talk to families, especially families like mine. Like I said, my mother was a single mom. I was first generation college student. She didn't know anything about how to even apply to college, like what you did to do that. I mean, I was fortunate that I had my junior year and senior year, I had school counselors that were fantastic, and they were actually the reasons I became a school counselor because I wanted to be just like them when I grew up.
Yeah.
And I always wanted to be able to help students, and so I'm just feeling this sense of urgency that I've got to do more on my part to make sure that any family that I work with has that information, has the information they need so that their family won't go into debt or not even, if you can't, if even if you can afford a little bit more, still making a financial decision that puts your family in the best place possible. And again, it's not about, I got to go to this school because it costs this much, there are so many schools out there with different price points that will work better for you.
Said it as well as I could ever say it. That's for sure. Um, Colleges, by and large, are mostly the same,
Yeah.
and it's what the student makes of it while they're there. And it doesn't
Definitely.
mean it's going to be easy, and it doesn't
Hmm.
mean it's going to be simple, but it's growing up.
It
And
is.
so, growing up without accumulating a ton of debt seems to be better than growing up while accumulating a ton of debt.
Hmm.
It makes sense that people ought to be able to shop by price.
That is so true. That is so true. And again, I love what you said about, it depends on what you do when you go there. One of our relatives recently graduated from Cornell into this fabulous job. Um, and in a conversation, he was talking about how other graduates of his class were still trying to find a job. And how did you get the job? And he said, remember those nights when you were like partying and stuff? And I was in the room studying and taking all these internships. That's how I got it. So
Bingo.
again, here he was at a college that has a name, but he knew what he was there for.
That's
He
right.
knew what he was there for. So he came out doing much better than some of his colleagues, than some of his fellow students. So take care of business while you're there. You can take care of business anywhere, believe me.
That's right.
Again, I love, Frank Bruni's book, Where You Go is not who you'll be.
Mm-hmm.
It's so true. It is
So
so,
true.
so true. And I just think people need to kind of get that in their heads and just go wherever you're going to go. Just go and do what you need to do and do a little bit more. That's
There's
what
a
you
lot
need
of
to do.
there's a lot of information, a lot of data out there now that you know young people grow up a little bit slower than they used to.
Mhm. Yeah.
And there's a lot of information about just how the world that we live in and all of the social media and all the dopamine triggers and everything else sort of affect the
Yes.
way that people grow up now. Um, and in the end, it makes a lot of sense to sort of just kind of take a step back and think about the long view.
Yes.
And it
Yes.
works out in the long view if you take
It
the.
does. It does. So, Mark, one of the things I always ask my guests is to recommend a book because folks that know me out there know that I have uncontrollably love to buy books. I am really, it's an addiction. It's an addiction. And I know it, there needs to be a 12-step program for buying books because I've got way
Yes, I
more.
think there should be too, and it should make you buy more of them because
Oh
we
my
need
God.
books, right?
It's crazy. It's
Yeah,
crazy. So the book that you recommended is Talking to Strangers by
right.
Malcolm Gladwell. So tell me what it was about this book because I've read this too. I'm a fan of Malcolm Gladwell, most of his stuff.
Yeah, like lots of authors, if they're written enough stuff, there's stuff you like more than others.
Hmm.
But what really struck me about this book was this sort of really puzzling conundrum that he starts with is and a couple of the examples are specific to stories that we've all heard about police pulling over oftentimes African American motorists and the situation just going horribly wrong, and him stepping back and saying, "How is that possible? Like, this just is so completely doesn't make sense." Um, and what he dives into is trying to understand how is it that we have so many instances in our society where two individuals come together in some situation. It doesn't necessarily have to always be police and the public, but other situations too where the thing just goes horribly wrong, and it just seems absurd. How is it that that happens? And he starts to pull some of the stuff back and really dive into what's going on in our culture that suggests that maybe things that we do and things that we all sort of contribute to without knowing to it create
Mm,
a culture in which we start by being afraid of the other, afraid of somebody who's different than us, and fearful in a way that triggers this defense response that then that other person would respond in the same way, and suddenly things get blown up into something
yeah,
that wouldn't, it makes no sense that it goes that direction. um, and I just found the book really thought provoking. I'm not sure that everything in there I totally buy,
right.
but we as a culture, we have to be able to get along and respect each other and accept difference and realize that even if somebody has an opinion that you think is absolutely bananas, that that doesn't necessarily make them evil.
Right.
And if we can't do that, we're going to have a really hard time maintaining effective democracy. And
Which we're seeing now.
yes, we are. Yes, we are.
Yes.
No matter which
Yeah.
side of the political spectrum you're on,
Right.
care about people on some basic level, you probably are a little worried about the way things have been playing out.
Yeah.
So I found this book to be really thought provoking, and made me think twice about a lot of things that have gotten a lot of press in the last several years
It
for a lot of good
has.
reasons, oftentimes.
Yes.
But I just found the book to be really thought provoking and useful in a way that helped me, I think, be maybe just hopefully a better person. And those are the kinds of things that really jump out to me when I'm looking for something to read or something to watch. Can I maybe come out of this being a better person than I was before?
Mm,
And if the answer is maybe, then I probably need to do it.
yeah. That is so true. That is so true. Mark, thank you so much. This has been a great conversation. One of my friends always says, how do you do this? I said, I just act like I'm talking to my seventh graders. I said, when you've taught middle school, you can do anything. You can do anything
Absolutely.
because middle school young folks will challenge you to be on your best behavior, on your toes, thinking whatever. But they taught me. I learned so much from my seventh graders over the years. So again, thank you so much for being here. Again, those of you who are just joining in or listening in on the replay, we have with us Mark Salisbury, who is the CEO and co-founder of TuitionFit. Here is the URL. I strongly encourage you to go on the site and start looking at it. And if once you look at it, you will have questions. So feel free to reach out to Mark at tuitionfit.org for all of your questions. And if you just want to learn a little bit more about what he feels about college and transparency and paying for college, you can certainly connect with him on LinkedIn. So, again, everyone, thank you so much for being here. Please make sure you share this out with your neighbors, your friends, your colleagues, somebody that you know that has a college bound student. And Mark, thank you so much for your time. I always have so much fun talking with you. I don't know, it's always such a nice conversation.
Well, it's an absolute treat to chat with you, and the reason that it's a nice conversation has a lot to do with you. You have a
Oh, thank
wonderful
you.
tone. You have a wonderful demeanor. It's just an absolute treat to talk to you, and I can't wait to do it again.
Oh, I appreciate that. Thank you so much. I don't know if my sons would agree with you. They might now that they're adults, well, not when they were kids. So, folks, please tune in next Monday for another episode of College and Career Conversations with Dr. B. You will have Dr. B here. I haven't quite chosen my topic yet. I'm working on it. But again, thank you so much for joining in because, as I said, one of my goals is to help families eliminate random acts of college planning, and that includes paying for it. So, Mark, hold on for a minute. Folks, I will see you next Monday evening. And again, don't forget, you have those questions about Tuition Fit. There's Mark's email. Please reach out to him. Take care, everyone, and see you next week.